Welcome to the class where tech takes the lead. Adam Todd here with just what you need. Teachers everywhere, let's elevate the game. With digital tools, we'll never be the same. In this podcast, we'll uncover the trends, from apps to gadgets on which we depend. Connect with your students in ways so fresh, innovative minds put to the test. In this podcast, we'll uncover the trends, from apps to gadgets on which we depend. Connect with your students in ways so fresh, innovative minds put to the test. Classroom dynamics where we all unite. Education future shining bright, with Adam Todd guiding us through. Teachers' paradise coming true.
Classroom Dynamics is supported by Logitech. As education continues to evolve, so does Logitech Education, your partner in content creation for the classroom. With Logitech's cutting-edge technology, students not only learn but also become content creators. Whether it's in person or online, Logitech's tools are designed to inspire educators and learners alike. Capture every educational moment in stunning detail and edit, produce, and share your creative journey with ease. Logitech Education, inspiring the next generation of creators. For more, visit logitech.com/education, transforming classrooms one innovation at a time. Welcome to Classroom Dynamics, the podcast where we get into the exciting world of technology and education. Hi everybody, I'm your host Adam Todd, and on the show today, we've got an exciting panel discussion lined up to talk all about the hot topics in education today. We're talking AI, cell phones in schools, and the huge amount, even overwhelming amount of EdTech programs that teachers have at their fingertips. Joining me are three incredible guests, each bringing their unique expertise to the table. Sue Thoughts of Common Sense Education is here to share insights on teaching digital citizenship and navigating technology responsibly in schools. Joining Sue is Michelle Ament, the Chief Academic Officer of ProSolve and co-president of the Human Intelligence Movement. And finally, we have Amanda Bickerstaff, founder and CEO of AI for Education, who's at the forefront of leveraging artificial intelligence to enhance learning outcomes. In this powerful episode, we'll be exploring the complex and often controversial world of technology within education. We'll explore AI and the human intelligence movement, discuss the pros and cons of tools like smartphones in schools, explore the flood of new EdTech options available, and tackle the rise of alternative learning methods like content creation in multiple forms that have come into existence in recent months. So how can schools sift through these innovations responsibly? What role does AI play in shaping the future of education? And how do we ensure that technology enhances and not hinders the classroom experience? Well, it's all next. So get ready for a dynamic conversation that goes beyond the buzzwords to the heart of what really matters in education today. And it's all next on Classroom Dynamics, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hey everyone, Adam Todd here, and I have to tell you about my absolute favorite must-have accessory, the Data Keeper Plus from Higher Ground Gear. Whether you're a busy teacher, a tech enthusiast, or just someone who wants to keep their devices safe and organized, this protective cover is a total game changer. With its sleek design, ultra-tough materials, and built-in storage for your essentials, it's the ultimate way to protect your tech. I take mine everywhere, and it always keeps my gear safe and looking brand new. Head over to hggear.com today and grab your Data Keeper Plus. You'll be glad you did. Data Keeper Plus, because your tech deserves higher ground. Today's episode is all about navigating the ever-growing and what seems to be never-ending evolutionary world of educational technology. To guide us through this important conversation, we're joined by an incredible panel of experts. First, we have Sue Thoughts, Senior Program Manager at Common Sense Education. Sue is an advocate for digital citizenship and helps educators empower students to navigate technology responsibly and ethically. We also have Michelle Ament, the Chief Academic Officer and co-president of the Human Intelligence Movement, an organization that focuses on the essential human-centered skills needed to be career-ready in an AI world. And finally, we're honored to have Amanda Bickerstaff, founder and CEO of AI for Education. Amanda is a leader in integrating artificial intelligence into classrooms with a focus on using AI to drive equity and creativity in learning. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to Classroom Dynamics. Welcome to the show. What an amazing all-star team we have here today.
Nice to be here.
Great to
to be here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Adam.
So, Sue, let's start with you. Your work with Common Sense Education focuses on teaching digital citizenship. With the rise of AI tools like ChatGPT and others being used by both teachers and students equally, how do we ensure that young learners are using these technologies ethically and responsibly in the classroom? Now, I know that it's a broad question for a very broad topic, but where do you even start with all that?
It's been interesting. That's a great question, Adam. I've been working a lot with administrators and teachers over the last couple of years. And really, it's been beginning with a lot of conversations and curiosity that teachers and administrators have, right? If they don't feel confident about the kind of information that they are then sharing with their students, they, of course, are not able to do so in a classroom. And so we've just been asking a lot of questions of these teachers, centered on, I kind of begin with values. Like, what are the values that are important to you, and how does technology impact your values? And then, we progress on to questions about, where can AI be used in your spaces, in your lives, in ways that you feel comfortable, right? Or, what are ways that make you uncomfortable? What are questions that you have? And so giving folks space to have these conversations. When I come in and do a PD or professional development, it's not necessarily about here's 50 tools in 5 minutes that you can use with AI to enhance your life. I don't do that kind of training. I very much ask people about, is it okay to use, if I'm a principal, can I use an AI tool to write my teacher evaluations? How does that make you feel, teachers? How does that make you feel, administrators, right? Is this acceptable? Is it okay for students to use a tool such as ChatGPT in your classroom for this type of situation? And it's more about beginning that conversation rather than prescribing an answer or doing something that is definitive, because things are changing so fast. How are we allowing the conversation and allowing it to be centered on the ways that students learn and the things that we think are important in education? So, just making it an inviting and welcoming conversation that is based on the things that you think are important as an educator.
You touched on professional development for a second. So let's go back for a half a second. What kind of training do you feel teachers need then? Because, just throwing it out there and hoping it sticks to the wall is not going to always work, especially with AI and how fast it does change.
Yeah. I think a lot of the folks, a lot of the guests that you have here today, we're working on things like AI literacy. How does AI work? What are the risks and the benefits that we might need to consider? So we have a lot, I know all of us here have resources that we use to share just a basic foundational knowledge of how AI works. But and so folks can do that a lot of times in like a self-paced way or in a webinar or, in something. But when I'm together in a room full of teachers, I want to use that space in a way that helps them, have conversations with each other and understand and get a culture going in that space so that we can consider what are acceptable ways to use this and how are we as teachers modeling acceptable use of AI in our classrooms and what kinds of guidance are we giving our students and understanding the realities of the ways that they want to use AI in their personal lives as well as in their schoolwork, right? And so how are we modeling guidance? How are we bringing in these conversations into the classroom? That's what we model in a lot of the professional development, is a lot of these ethical questions and some of the things that we are facing every single day and trying to make it a reality for the educators that we see.
It's an interesting dilemma, right, on both ends.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's pivot to the human intelligence then with it. So we also have Michelle Ament. Hi, Michelle. I know you've been on before as well. So welcome back to Classroom Dynamics.
Thanks.
Obviously, human intelligence in an AI world is a big passion for you. Why is this component to AI such a critical piece of that puzzle moving forward with kids in the future, teachers in the future, education as a whole in the future?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is really finding the balance as we look ahead to a world that is AI integrated. Our society is using AI, our workforce is using AI. We're using it all the time, whether it is large language models or AI assisted tools. And so it's finding the balance between that use and the uniquely human skills that we need in our world. And so the human intelligence movement is really devoted to identifying what does it mean to have skills that cannot be replicated by AI. And so our research team did some foundational work to put out a position that we have around these competencies are around social, emotional, adaptability, and cognitive competencies. And so the next thing that we really want to begin to put awareness, because we've had those type of skills, those human skills all along. But like I was saying, the next thing that we want to really put some energy around and create awareness around is what makes those skills uniquely human. So an example that I give is, when you think about empathy, when I use a large language model, it will sound empathetic. It will try to be relational with me. And we want to really make sure that we're building uniquely human empathy and not just a prescribed sense of empathy. The same with creativity. AI can be very creative, but what is it about human creativity that is unique to us as individuals? And so in our school system, what we want to really focus on is how are we prioritizing those uniquely human skills in our classroom? And what does it mean to create the conditions for learning so that I can build these uniquely human skills? Because our position right now is that our school system is really stuck in a model that is much more traditional, kind of perpetuates that factory model of education, where the dynamics of a classroom environment, classroom dynamics podcast, the dynamics of a classroom environment have to change. The conditions have to change. We have to allow students the opportunity to be curious, ask questions, be able to fail and make mistakes to become resilient and adaptable. And those are some of the uniquely human skills that we will need, that we just don't feel like our classrooms today are given that opportunity to create that environment because of some practices that are, just to be honest, outdated and need to change. So this organization is really focused on educational reform and what does it mean to elevate those uniquely human skills so students can thrive in an AI integrated world.
Do you find that when you point out the quote unquote human intelligence portion of that to educators that they look at it differently all of a sudden, or they become more aware of that all of a sudden?
Somewhat. I think more than anything, they're just happy someone is saying human intelligence is as important as artificial intelligence, and also just advocating for the need for more human-centered, student-driven learning environments that allow the opportunity for human potential to really be built. And so I feel like sometimes it's less of a new idea for teachers and more of a thank you, someone is saying something that we've known as educators, and let's figure out how to reduce our standardized assessments, reduce those accountability measures, and become more focused on the human skills, the human aspect of learning.
It's good that they're waving the flag and pointing it out, and realizing, okay, yes, something has to be done about it, because you can't not have that in that portion of artificial intelligence. Even human intelligence, although it is different, you need that in there. Otherwise, what are we teaching the kids?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think through this conversation today, we're going to see a lot of parallels with what the three of us talk about, because even when Sue was talking about the digital citizen, digital AI literacy, that is a human skill that you're teaching, right, and elevating and making sure. But it's taking a moment to think, what is it about that is uniquely human, and how does that maybe elevate the need for those skills?
That's so interesting. Amanda, as someone at the forefront of AI in education, what do you see as the most promising applications of AI for schools and for educational purposes?
I think that I need to maybe make a point to say that I don't think that any of the technology is particularly fit for purpose yet to see systematic change. I think that taking apart, teasing out AI as a field with machine learning products that have been part of our schools for 20 years versus generative AI systems, which are being released every day and are just over 2.5 years old in terms of the consumer awareness. is that I think that AI systems have been shown to have, there are opportunities for, personalized learning. There's opportunities for all kinds of like predictive and recommendation engines that we already see. I think that generative AI at this stage, we have to kind of recognize that one of the biggest issues around today is that the technology just isn't very good yet. I mean, we make a joke in all of our trainings that, do you remember dial-up? And like, remember like how much you had to commit to downloading a 20-second video. And like, if you did it overnight and you woke up the next morning and it failed, you're like, do I really want to watch this video?
It's
Like
true.
the internet took so long to get to a place where it actually impacted not just the way we communicate, the way we teach, the way we learn, et cetera, that to think that a new, transformational technology that is an arrival technology in 2.5 years is going to be fit for purpose when it is a general consumer technology for schools, I think is something that is a very difficult place to be in, because if you look at LinkedIn, if you look at emails from EdTech providers, if you look at the noise and investment, it seems like everyone should be adopting chatbots for kids and everyone should be adopting Gen AI tools. And somehow it's going to save you a ton of time and productivity and make you more efficient and in all these things. And realistically, if you look at the data across every industry and education, is that the significant impacts right now are at the individual level. That when people have significant AI literacy, the time to explore, and a great opportunity to access the top tier models, that you start to see some pretty remarkable things that are happening. But to think that like at this point that there are applications that are happening within schools that are really about what generative AI will mean for schools outside of the disruption around academic integrity and then the edge work that's happening by early adopters and others, I think is really hard, because there's a sense of like FOMO that's happening. And I'm sure Sue and Michelle see this, where like everyone's like, teacher talk says you must use these tools and suddenly you will be, you will never have to lesson plan again. Or, you're going to have an on-demand tutor that's going to be the best for you and engaging and pedagogical and meaningful. And what's happened is like, that's really difficult. And so what we see is that like, of course, there are some really wonderful examples of piloting use cases over tools of like integrating AI literacy work, of building responsible guidelines. But we tell people, we've been doing this work a lot. No one has this nailed. And I mean that in the sense of like, none of our businesses have this nailed, not a government, a business, not even Microsoft turning off ChatGPT access. It's happening everywhere. McDonald's having to turn off their Gen AI kiosks because the $17 billion company can't get it, people from trying to like order weird things. And then the AI saying, sure. That if we think that that somehow is going to now be like able to like make this huge difference in schools, then we're putting people in a false dichotomy and we're putting them in false pressure that doesn't need to happen. So like for us, like while we are excited about things, I think that we believe just so strongly that AI literacy and like generative AI literacy specifically, like really understanding what generative AI is and isn't and starting to build capacity when developmentally appropriate is a great way to start seeing the actual opportunities and the applications that can happen, because this is democratizing access to building with technology. And so like, a teacher can be a technologist in a way that was never possible before. A student can be a technologist in a way that was never possible before. But I always think it's really funny because people are like, Amanda, tell me like the 5 best tools. And I have to be like, I'm so sorry. I wish I could, my life would be so much easier. AI for Education, our entire team would be so happy if we go and say, okay, here are the 3 things to do and the 3 things. And we have to say, no, actually, this is a time for like learning and capacity building and nuance and conversation. And you're like, oh gosh, that's a lot harder. It's a lot harder than just saying, here's the tool to use. And so while very optimistic, I think we have to measure our approach.
Do you think like risks that educators and teachers have to take with bias, even with students, in terms of getting to that level of junior high school students, college students who are really embracing generative AI like ChatGPT? Are they at risk there?
I mean, I think that AI native will not mean AI literate, the same way that digitally native does not mean digitally literate. And so even when students are adopting these tools, I've seen the same way that I probably have trained more people on ChatGPT than almost anyone in the US, if not the most people. And even the most highly educated, I think I know what this is, because the technology is new and non-intuitive in the way we use technology. It has to have intentional teaching about what to use and when to use it. And also when not to use it. Like when should you not be using this tool, to like Michelle's point about the uniquely human parts of your life that you should not be giving away. So I do think that, yes, that there are some risks associated. I mean, we have been in situations where we've heard how teachers are telling, and I love teachers, but like some people are really gung-ho about this and telling 12-year-olds to lie about that they're 13, or literally today when we're researching a student AI literacy component of our Train the Trainer that we have online, we're looking for AI and safety. And what we find is not AI and safety for kids. What we find instead is, here's this ChatGPT course for a fourth grader. And so I think that I know Sue's face says it all. I will say our Slack community had a moment, like my little Slack team. But I do think that when we think about this is that, the way that we approach devices, internet, social media, and thought if you have access to them, it will somehow mean that you know how to use them responsibly, effectively, and safely. We found out that that was not the case. And so we cannot lift and shift that outdated mode of what didn't work with technology that's come before it, and then put it into this moment, knowing how quickly and how impactful this will be. So I think I feel like I've been screaming into the void for 18 months now, and with a lot of wonderful people, including those on the call, that AI literacy, it has to be a foundational skill we're building, because we need to know what's going to happen. And the only way we're going to do that is by having an informed populace.
Okay, so you had a moment there. What do you want to say?
Moments everywhere. Are you kidding? These women are amazing and so smart, and I'm 100% with every single thing that they're saying. And I'm so glad to be in this conversation, because you guys are answering a lot of questions that I have a hard time answering. And it's so easy to sit back and listen and hear you articulate all the things that I feel and do it in such a great way. So I guess when I know that kids are using generative AI. I know that they are speaking to Siri all day long. I know that our tiny children are experiencing technology in ways that would raise our eyebrows, regularly, right? But, where do we as educators kind of find this balance between understanding the realities of, we did a study last year that said 70% of teens are using generative AI tools, right? And some of them are using it for homework. And half of those kids who are using it for homework aren't even using it with teacher permission. They're explicitly using it without teacher permission, right? And so we know that this is the reality. But at the same time, and we don't want to, ignore this. I come from the area of public health, right? So I understand teenagers' risk, sex education, and, risky behavior. I don't want to put it in that risky behavior type category in the physical sense, but
it kind of is, right? It kind of is,
right?
It kind of does fall into that category.
And so with the teenage brain, the intention of that teenage brain, it's built to take risks. It's built to explore. It's built to be independent. It's built to push boundaries. And so if we as educators are not acknowledging the use of a lot of these tools, and if we are not having these conversations on a regular basis, when it comes to even things like social media or any kind of technology, not just generative AI technology, we're doing our students a disservice by not having these conversations and helping them understand the risks and the benefits and acknowledging that in a real way, right? And acknowledging their use and their lived experience as students who are living in this world full of technology. And so do I think that we should be designing ChatGPT courses for fourth graders? No, absolutely not, right? That's a little bit too far, right? So for me, that's woo. And do I, as a teacher, want to explicitly use some of these tools in my classroom with my students, in ways to me, that's where I find these conversations really helpful, to find out where are we drawing that line for now? And how is that line changing as we get more and more better tools and more experience and a better understanding of the integration of these generative AI tools into our lives? And so that's where I think these conversations are really interesting. And we need to have them regularly in order to be able to figure out what it is that we can do to best serve our students.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to explore one of the biggest hot topics there currently is, and that's the debate on cell phones in schools. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back in just 30 seconds. AI can save teachers time, but what if it could do more? With Your Way, AI is built specifically for your school or district, aligning cutting-edge technology with your instructional goals, strategies, and vision. Empower teachers to personalize instruction, create engaging lessons, and implement innovative practices, all while saving time for what matters most. Why settle for one-size-fits-all AI? Customize and build your way safely and seamlessly. Discover AI that works your way at yourwaylearning.com. Welcome back to Classroom Dynamics. So one of the biggest and most challenging topics that is out there right now it's very controversial, is the debate on whether smartphones stand within a school or they don't. Where do they land? There's a safety concern. There's a learning opportunity. There are pros and cons, of course. So how do schools effectively balance the potential of cell phones as a powerful learning tool with the need to minimize distractions and maintain equitable access? To also keep in mind that there's a safety factor, especially with a parent connection. So there isn't a solid right answer with this. I don't think you're ever going to find a right answer, but how do you all view it? Where does this all come into play? Cell phones, the technology, safety, education, where does it all fall?
I love to talk about cell phones. And I do it regularly with various groups, mostly administrators. I think this was all brought up by Jonathan Haidt and the anxious generation and the concern of parents as well as of administrators and the distractions that cell phones pose for the lives of our kids, especially when they are in classrooms. And, a lot of states now are really trying to address this issue, at a policy level. And so for me, for those states that do have requirements of reducing cell phones in classrooms and addressing this, we have done a lot of look at various cell phone policies across the country. Common Sense, we've been collecting different cell phone policies and trying to figure out what does that implementation of that cell phone ban look like. And so there are various methods, including, we've seen yonder pouches. We've seen, students having to put them in the locker. We've seen them like out of sight, out of mind kind of ways, right? So I have a whole table full of advantages and disadvantages of each different model, right? That I've been collecting and hearing from different administrators on what this looks like. And I'm sure many of you have read articles about how students, the lunchroom is loud again, right? Students are engaging more in their, in their relationships and in their interpersonal communication with other students. And the biggest pushback that a lot of folks are getting are from parents, and the lack of direct communication from parents to students. And as a parent of two teenagers, I experience this all the time, where I love being able to contact my kid all the time. But as a parent, I have to be more disciplined around, and you have to have parent buy-in when it comes to implementing these bans. You have to figure out workarounds for ways that parents can effectively communicate with their kids without having them being interrupted in the classroom. And so, so I don't know, I'm going to stop talking and hear what you guys have to say.
I mean, I'm going to say this is definitely I'm really boring everybody. It's generative AI all the time. I haven't done anything non-generative AI in a while. So I really think about it more in the sense of like what I'm seeing happen, which is this like with school boards, for example, that there's like a conflating of the cell phone and device roles with generative AI, and that school boards are kind of like they're all the same thing. And so I've done a couple of these pieces where like my whole job was just redirecting school boards for their leaders to make sure that they realize that these are separate things and one policy does not denote the other. And I think that like I see like devices as this canary in the coal mine of what could happen at hyperspeed with like Gen AI, right? Especially since Gen AI is legitimately it's going to be the next time that every school buys new laptops, iPads, Chromebooks, it's going to have a generative AI feature in them. Like there's not going to be a software, like a hardware in a school in like 8 to 10 years that will not have generative AI natively enabled in them. So I do think it's kind of interesting though, because I think that we're just catching on somehow. Like when I say that, I mean, slightly sarcastically, we knew this was a problem for a long time, but we never took the time to like figure out what that meant. That it's kind of like the wrong time to be talking about this. There's like a much bigger, I think there's like a much bigger like technology plus human conversation and technology plus young person conversation. That if we could actually find a way to do the research and to do something intentional around like technology in general, including hardware devices, social media and generative AI. I think that would be better because I think we don't have the capacity. And like, I know Michelle and Sue understand this, like schools have barely the capacity to do like one thing. And like, we've thrown a lot of things at them. And then now we're going to do like this, this thing about technology, this thing about technology, like that is going to max this out very quickly.
Yeah. And I think it also, there's this gradient that as you go from elementary school to middle school to high school, it gets a little bit more involved because you look elementary kids, as a parent myself, if my daughter is in, fourth grade in an elementary school, it's good just to have that as a, okay, well, I'll pick you up at 3:30 at the park, or in front of the school, or I can't make it today, I'm sending so-and-so instead. That's the great communication. Then you start to get into more safety concerns. We've had gun issues in schools, right? Junior high schools, high schools. And I think that it just balloons as you get further down the line up until 12th grade. And that's where the parent portion comes into play. And it's very hard for the parent, that particular technology is there, to then say, you know what? I need to have this. I don't care what your school says, you're going to take a cell phone to school. I need to be able, I don't want to be that parent that can't get into contact with you. So it's an interesting dynamic as you go from an elementary school up to a high school. Michelle?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts and ideas on this topic, Adam. And, one of the things that earlier at the beginning of the school year, I asked a family member who was starting their junior year in high school, how's back to school going? And he said, it sucks. I hate school. They take my cell phone away and I have to put it in this pouch. It's the dumbest thing ever. Here's another rule that we put on kids. Here's another thing that we said you can't do. And we're talking about an 11th grader who we are robbing them the opportunity to learn the human skills to navigate this. And I just think that rather than put another ban in place or another guideline that says what you can and can't do, instead, how are we equipping students with the human skills to be able to navigate this? And I have young adults. So I have a 20-year-old, a 23-year-old, and they currently have to I will not deny that social media is addicting. They actually have to remove the apps from their phone. So my son was just over the other night and he took all of them off of his phone because he didn't have the self-discipline. He had the self-awareness to know it was interrupting the life that he wanted, but didn't have the self-discipline. And so what does that signal like for the skills that we do need to be equipping kids with and be able to make sure that they have? And I don't think the ban of, no, you can't use it, it has to be in your locker or the pouch, is going to help get us closer to having those skills that we need as humans. Now, I'll also say, I don't think it's not the school's responsibility to solve for this. The problem is greater than schools. So when you think about social media is addicting, okay, so what are we doing about that at a larger meta level in terms of how are we putting guidelines around social media, what it is doing, and not putting all of this on schools' problem now, because what is the bigger societal approach to this than saying, okay, schools, you have to put guidelines and bans in place. So I think it's unfair to do that. And it's kind of a call for how do we as a whole society think about social media, the use of cell phones and so on, because I think it is beyond just school-age children. So those are some of kind of my passionate, maybe radical views. I think the last thing I'll say, which is when my children were in high school, they were on their cell phones a lot. And one of the reasons they would watch a full movie or play a video game during math class is because the teacher stood at the front of the room and lectured at them, and they knew the content and they were bored out of their minds. And so I just have to say, like, what does it mean to change what the learning looks like? If it was highly relevant, they were deeply engaged in solving a problem, contributing and adding value to something, could those cell phones be used to augment that and further that versus consumption of information? And so now I've got my consumption of my social media while I can also consume the person at the front of the room giving me information. So really stopping to think about who our kids are today and what type of learning environment they need. And I don't think that's any different than the type of learning environment kids needed 20 years ago, but now they have other things to consume and create with. So those are some of I'm curious what Sue and Amanda are thinking, or you, Adam, someone that is probably closest to the cell phone issue than any of us.
I see the kids, some of them in the older grades, those fourth and fifth graders might have a cell phone. I don't ever see them out at school. So they are pretty good in my particular school. And again, and it's a good point you made before. Every situation is going to be different, right? Every school is going to be different. Districts, states, all those, it's all going to be different. I do see that high school kids, you always see them out. They're always walking on the street. Every single one of them might be walking in a pack of 10, and every single one of them is holding a cell phone with their head down. Their face is buried in it. You see this at dinner time, out in restaurants all the time, whether you're, giving an iPad to a 1-year-old to keep them from crying, so mom and dad can go and have a nice dinner, or the teens are just bored out of their mind and they're all on their phones anyway. I think it boils down to parenting a little bit too. And, a combination of, trying not to get addicted to those particular social media apps that ends up leading to more cell phone use. That's my opinion. Can cell phones be used in school effectively? I think they could. It's just generating the correct curriculum that would allow it. Who's the teacher? Can the teacher handle it? Some teachers won't be able to handle that kind of freedom while others can. It also depends on the curriculum that you're doing. There's a lot that ends up feeding into this, and I don't really think there is a true answer, but that's, just what I've been seeing lately, Sue.
Yeah, I think that, most of the teachers that I end up speaking with about this are just tired of policing, and they're tired of being the person who is the bad guy. All the time. Yes, like no teacher wants to be put in this position. Right. And that yet, with these phones that are in the pockets of these kids, it's so tempting. And so a lot of teachers express relief whenever it is taken out of the hands of the teacher and it is now in the hands of the administrator, and it's the administrator who is now the bad guy, and this is just what is the culture of our school. So that's one thing. In terms of like having access to technology, one-to-one laptops are just part of everyday culture. It's a part, post-pandemic, it's just everybody has technology for the most part that I have seen. And so we aren't dependent upon the bring your own device model anymore in classrooms in order for kids to be able to access technology, especially at the secondary level. And when it comes to school safety, that is one of the big pushbacks that I get from parents is I want to be able to have access to my student, whenever they're in school for safety reasons. But in talking to an administrator, he's like, listen, I had a shooting at my school. And, at my school, when students had devices, the emergency medical services could not quite get through. I'm in a rural place where we don't have, access to a whole lot of cell service everywhere. And if you really want all of your students on devices at the time of a lockdown, or, do you want your students paying attention to their devices instead of to the teacher in the front of the room who's going to keep them safe? Do you want those phones dinging and whirring like during this time? He's like, to me, I would much rather have all those phones locked away or gone as opposed to, having them, all students being able to talk to their parents incessantly during the time of an emergency. So these are some of them, some of the things that I've heard and listened to over the year. I think it's an opportunity to really focus on like helping your students know that this is not a punishment, and we're not anti-technology, and we're not taking away your cell phones because we want you to be sad and lonely. We want you to be in a space where you can focus. This is about you and your well-being. And if districts can message this correctly and in a supportive way, because we know that taking devices out of the hands of kids is not going to solve all problems. They're not going to all be like, yes, this is great, I'm ready to learn, right? Like that doesn't solve anything. How are we giving them other sources of social emotional support, of comfort, of ways to be able to communicate with each other and to relearn some of those skills that are so important to us when it comes to relationships and communication?
It's definitely going to be a hot topic that is going to not end, anytime soon. It's going to keep going, and somebody hopefully will figure it out eventually. But till that happens, this is going to be the dilemma, the, damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, right? So let's pivot now into just EdTech tools, because there are so many EdTech tools that are available to teachers. They flood the market every year. They have so much that they can pick from, that to the point where sometimes they just want to turn away and say, okay, I don't even know where to start. I don't know what to do. Just kind of like what Amanda mentioned before, could we ask her for 5 great AI tools? Perhaps it doesn't really work that way. So you have everything from, again, AI to content creation programs. There's a slew of online assessment tools that are available to teachers. How can educators and school leaders sift through all of these options, there's a tremendous amount of options just to choose tools that genuinely enhance learning outcomes and also align to the school goals that they have. Where do you even begin with this? There is so much out there.
So I think that, as someone that's been an EdTech leader, like I was, I've been in EdTech for last 10 years and then ran an EdTech company in Australia for 3 just before I started A for Education. I think that there's a real breakdown in a couple of things around EdTech. Like one is around the misaligned incentives between traditional venture capital funding and models around returns and what actually happens in schools, and a real disconnect into what we're prioritizing, like growth and revenue growth over outcomes. So I think that's a big issue. I think secondly, there is kind of a Venn diagram of EdTech where there's companies that are built by educators with limited technical experience, companies built by technologists with almost no education experience. And then there's in the middle, there's kind of either partnership and or people that have done both. And I think that what's happening is what we often see is that leads to a lot of solutions going after problems, a lot of legitimately repetitive action in terms of there are 95 Quizlets, or Kahoots, or, that we're building the same thing in silos with limited true better functionality. And especially in the US, there's so many districts that you can kind of have that model work. And what it means is we have a lot of players that are not actually evidence-based or are doing what they need to for schools and systems. But I'll give an example specifically about generative AI. So when we worked with Chicago Public Schools to help co-write their AI guidance, which we believe is they really went to the breach on this. They put themselves out there. When they did we had the tool kind of vetting tools component. There were 894 AI tools that had been used in the district the year before.
Wow.
894. And that's not generative, right? But I think that, there are some estimations that there are 2,000 different EdTech or tech tools used in one district of a medium size. And so I think that what often happens is there's not enough knowledge about what the purpose, what's actually happening. We know we need a student information system. We know we need a learning management system. And now they're saying that we know we need a student chatbot. We're like, do you? But okay. But, it's one of those buckets that we have to fill, right? And what happens is we're going to get into a 10-year contract. We cannot move from it, even if it's not very good. There are these really misaligned incentives also from the actual at the district and school level. So I think it's really hard to be a leader. It's also, I'm going to be honest though, if you're a school leader listening or a teacher, it is just as hard to build stuff that works as well. It was being an EdTech CEO was really hard. Every single school was different. It was wild how difficult it was. So it really kind of comes from both sides. If you want to look at Gen AI EdTech tools, we have a very simple resource on our website that's 5 questions to ask Gen AI EdTech providers around the things that you should be asking before you bring in. First of all, you'll see 3 of the 5 are just general, what you should be asking about any technology that's being used in schools, around efficacy, around accessibility, around data privacy and security. But then it goes deeper into things that are very specific to generative AI, around the human-centered approach, the things around bias, hallucinations, reliability, et cetera. So at least we're trying to help, but realistically, on one side it's hard, on the other side it's hard, and then in the middle it's it's a bit of chaos, I think, especially post-COVID.
I think also when you get funding, whether it's from a grant or wherever you're getting your funding from, and it's almost like a use it or lose it, a lot of times you'll find that administrators will just purchase just to purchase because they don't want to lose the money. And they're afraid to not make the decision to not have something over something that may not be good in the first place.
Adam, I go back to my time in the classroom around 2013, 2014, when devices were just really accessible. There was a laptop cart in my school and I checked it out every day. And I was every shiny new application that was out there, I was signing up for. And one week we would try this and the next week we would try this. And my kids' heads probably were spinning because I was so excited about all the opportunity to do something fun and creative and engaging. And I think about right now where there is that same sentiment, even more so, to Amanda's point around, there's just this idea that if you aren't embracing and using every day, you're behind. And so what I learned from that experience was that, and that I would pass along to today, is that I wasn't really centered in what I wanted my kids to learn and what was the purpose of the tool that I was selecting. And so I think an advice for educators and administrators is being really, really clear on purpose, the why behind it. If I want to build students' curiosity and increase their ability to ask inquiry questions, what kind of tools might I use that foster that central principle or that core idea that I want to bring into my classroom or into my school? And I think having that North Star is then what you can evaluate. Is this tool something that will really amplify what I am trying to do? And I wish when I had started using a lot of technology in my classroom, someone had told me that, because it wouldn't have been just everything in the kitchen sink. I would have been more selective in what I was trying to do. And at the end of the day, that is what is going to get you closer to impact, is when the purpose is grounded and is driving what you're doing. And what we all want is deep learning for kids. And so that would be my suggestion as I think about this kind of onset of so many tools, and especially all the generative AI tools that have flooded the market as well.
It's interesting. The perspectives are all there, right? And it's true. I like how you said that every shiny new tool, because I kind of do the same too now, but I think now I'm more, let's experiment with it to see where this is going to take me. And if I don't like it, I won't use it again. If it's a success, I'm going to go and use this every year with my curriculum, and I'm going to start to integrate it more with other grades. So sometimes I'll test it out a little bit, but I think you're right. There's so much out there that, you almost, in a way, you do have to pick and choose, and you do have to experiment a little bit, but there has to come a point where you have to say to yourself, let's just stick with what we know works. So we're going to take another quick break. We'll be right back right after this. We have one more final question for our panel that will help us feel better about what our roles are as educators in this 21st century and what our next steps need to be. We'll be right back. Are you looking for lessons that truly engage your students? Say goodbye to boring worksheets and hello to highly motivated on Teachers Pay Teachers. From interactive lab books to engaging lesson plans and test prep passages, our resources are designed to save you time and ignite student learning. Whether you teach STEM, social studies, or ELA, we've got you covered. Visit Highly Motivated on Teachers Pay Teachers today and transform your classroom with materials that engage, inspire, and motivate. Make learning unforgettable. Search Highly Motivated on Teachers Pay Teachers today. Teachers, podcasters, and classroom creators, take your content to the next level with Logitech Education. Whether you're recording a student-led podcast, creating engaging lesson videos, or producing professional quality classroom content, Logitech has the tools you need. With crystal clear cameras, studio quality microphones, perfect lighting solutions, and seamless editing gear, their full portfolio of content creation solutions empowers educators and inspires students. Bring professional-grade production into your classroom today. Visit logitech.com/education to learn more. Welcome back to Classroom Dynamics, where today we're talking with three talented and amazing educators, Sue Thoughts, Michelle Ament, and Amanda Bickerstaff. As we think about the future of education, with technology especially playing an even greater role, what are some of the key skills students need to thrive in a tech-driven world moving forward into the next quarter of this 21st century? And how can educators start to build those skills today? So what's one inspirational takeaway that each of you can suggest to our listeners?
I was still kind of mulling over your last question in terms of the technology that we're bringing into our classrooms. And I was kind of looking through a list of, at Common Sense, one of the things we do is we are a reader and a reviewer of EdTech tools. And I think the intention when we first started doing this was to take away some of the garbage and really focus on how we could elevate tools that are actually helpful and useful to teachers in the classroom. And as I'm looking through this list, if I think about myself in a classroom, one of the things that I really want to bring to that classroom is the ability to communicate well and effectively and collaborate, between my students. And so as I'm looking, I'm going to share this list with you, but as I'm looking through this list, a lot of these are like whiteboard or screencasting apps or, collaborative tools. And so these are things that like I could not have done in the classroom growing up, of course, right? Like these tools make things so much easier and more transparent between students as well as between a student and a teacher, right? I can't always tell what a student is thinking if they're just sitting there, but sometimes we can use these tools to help our students really be transparent in their thinking and share how they solve this problem or what they're doing to change their writing or when we're using technology as teachers who have this opportunity, how are we making sure that we're not just using it to separate ourselves from students in a way that the kids are on a computer just sitting there shoveling in all this test prep or something, right, and isolating themselves? How are we using technology in ways that help our students to connect with each other and connect with me as a teacher so that we can move forward in the most efficient and enjoyable way? And so we're also developing some of these communication skills and a lot of the collaboration that we're really looking for as our students. This is the kind of stuff that I do every day. This is the kind of stuff that I do every day in my job, is like working with my colleagues and sharing with them and trying to figure out a tool where we can see into each other's brains, even though we're across the country from each other. And I don't think that's going away. I think we're all in need of being able to communicate effectively and share and really cooperate when it comes to the work that we're doing that we feel passionately about. And so giving students these kinds of skills, that's just not going to go out of style.
That was a great point about the collaboration, because I think the more you use the technology to have the kids collaborate, whether they're sitting right next to one another or they're at home in each other's, house and working together collaboratively on something, it really does really drive home the fact that this is what their future is going to be like. And if we can give them those skills now, they're going to be that much better on it with it later on. And not only that, but then it also opens up a whole new world where, just 2 or 3 people in a group now can become a worldwide connection to some degree and work on projects across the world that you couldn't have done, maybe just 10, 15 years ago.
Adam, I think that Sue did just a remarkable job articulating the human intelligences, those skills that can't be replicated by AI that we're going to need. And so my inspiration is do that, but create the conditions in your classroom to really build those skills, because in a traditional style of teaching, those skills aren't built. It takes having a human-centered classroom, having collaborative structures in place, having learning that is done through experience, that you are doing something, you're solving problems, you have that real-world connection, and that it creates kind of that intrinsic motivation. I think that is like the one area to really, really focus on is adaptability competencies. How are we instilling in kids that intrinsic motivation, that internal motivation to continue to learn, to continue to unlearn, to continue to have flexibility? And I think I've talked about my 3 young adults. I do not see them as they're in that Gen Z generation, hardcore, and I do not see them as being internally motivated. And I talked to my son about this last weekend, and his entire K-12 career was about consuming information. And so my inspiration would be to find ways to have kids really be in places where they are creating and being collaborative and having to actually authentically use the day-to-day skills we all use in our jobs. Because if we don't give them those opportunities, they won't be able to build that human intelligence. And our world needs that now, but even more so as we look ahead to the future.
And what do you say to a teacher who's afraid to be adaptive like that, to make that change and to take that leap into where they may not feel comfortable? What would you say to them?
I think the advice that I would give is to try something. Maybe start with being comfortable with not having to know all the answers. Be alongside your students in asking curious questions, and be okay with saying, I don't know the answer to that. Let's see if we can figure that out together. I think just beginning to shift from being the one that always is the smartest in the room, having all the answers, to distributing that among the students. And, when you do that, you'll start to see strengths and assets emerge from kids that you never knew existed.
I can't tell you how many times a kid will ask me a question about a program that we're learning basically at the same time. even for myself, if it's something brand new that I'm testing out and I say, I don't know, let's go find out. And the look on their face is like, wow, that was, you can see there's a real expression there. And, it's a nice connection to have actually when you actually do say, I don't know, let's go find out together. Let's go research it together. Let's figure it out together. They, I think, respond better to a teacher when a teacher does do that versus a teacher says, oh, I know, I'll show you. And they have to quickly figure it out and hopefully they get the right answer.
Absolutely.
Amanda?
I think if we're going to do inspirational, I would say that this is probably the foremost time in our entire history where we have an opportunity to co-construct what comes next in schools. This is going to be something that is going to be led in schools by teachers and students and communities if it's done at all. The systems themselves will need to be changed from the bottom up, inside out, and top down. And I think that what we have is that, these systems allow us to do things that we've always wanted to do in some way, shape, or form. Who would not want to be able to communicate with the student that has just walked into I'll talk from my own experience. I taught in the high school biology in the Bronx. I had a group of 18 students from 16 different countries, some who had never, ever been in a classroom, in a formal classroom in ninth grade, where the first thing they have to be tested on is living environment or biology. And I was their teacher. And, that was almost an impossible thing to ask them to do. But now with the technology as it is, to be able to actively communicate in the native language back and forth with those students is something that it can be truly remarkable. To give a voice to students that are nonverbal, or to give creativity to those that have motor skill issues and or low to no vision, to be able to create spaces in which, no longer is it like cultural capital, if we do this the right way, is going to get you that extra support at home, because if you learn how to use these tools the right way, in a responsible way, that you can have that support built in. So I do think that there are a lot of really good opportunities. I think that the most important thing to do, though, is just recognize that the system has to change. We put so much, we're talking about what teachers can do. We put so much on teachers, but if the high stakes assessments don't change, if the methods around how funding for schools don't change, in terms of enrollment and the structure around seat time and those things, then that innovation and that opportunity will be snuffed out like every other time we've been close to seeing some change at any level. So I hope and I always like to shift this, because I think that there is onus that needs to be put more on technology companies building tools, that these are not just wide open experimental consumer facing tools with the endpoint only being monetary gain, that we need to put onus on those that are building regulations and what we're doing with the actual AI itself in terms of how we keep people safe. But then also the systems, the people that build the systems, that need to see that this is something that it's going to require moving away from a model of education that was created because of the last truly huge inflection point of our life, the Industrial Revolution, right? There's the information age, of course, but this is, I think that realistically, we're talking about something that's going to be so much more comprehensive. So while I think it's such a good opportunity, we really need to have those that have power, entrenched power, recognize that they have a huge part of this. And that's the only way we're going to move forward together, where we can see a better future for our students and our lives and keep the humanity in what we do, is if we work together, which is not something we do that easily, unfortunately.
Right. Pandora's box has been opened, and now we have to kind of figure out the right direction we need to go. I agree. Thank you, guys. This has been such an insightful discussion today. We've covered so much, from the promise of pitfalls in AI in education to the ongoing debate about cell phones in schools and the importance of choosing the right technology tools for your classroom. A huge thank you for all of you for coming and taking your time today. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and helping us really start to navigate the complex but very crucial topics that we have in front of us. Before we go, let's tell everyone where they can go to find out more about each of you with social and websites. So Amanda, let's start with you.
Well, unfortunately, I'm very on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn. We share a lot there. And then we have an entire huge amount of resources. Our website was viewed by over 1 million people last year with a free course on Gen AI literacy. We have a prompt library, and a whole bunch of free resources at aifореducation.io.
Sue.
I am also on LinkedIn. I'd say that's the place where I spend the most time among 5 other social media sites, but this is the one, probably like Amanda. You will find me with the most relevant information. And you can also find all of the content from Common Sense Education at commonsense.org/education. And it is all free for educators, including K-12 lesson plans on AI literacy, digital citizenship, digital well-being, as well as training for teachers.
Thank you. Michelle.
Thanks, Adam. 2 places you can find me are on LinkedIn for sure. And then also 2 websites. One is the humanintelligencemovement.org. So all one word, humanintelligencemovement.org. And then you can also learn about my work through ProSolve at prosolve.com. And that's our K-5 human skills curriculum, where you can find that. And I invite everyone to join the human intelligence movement. I think Amanda, what you said around bringing people together in the community together to really make change at a systemic level is what we're all about. So I hope you'll check it out.
Yeah, you need to check out all of the websites that were just mentioned. They are all fantastic and amazing resources. So again, thank you. For those of you who have been listening, thank you for tuning in today, and make sure that you share what you've learned or any takeaways or reflections that you've had, and tag us on X at Class Dynamics or Instagram at Classroom Dynamics Podcast. You can also find out all of our links, including information about our sponsors, on Linktree at Classroom Dynamics. We always look forward to hearing your thoughts on our episodes and sharing the different ways in which you're using what you've learned. You can also help support Classroom Dynamics with as little as $3 a month at classroomdynamicspodcast.buzzsprout.com. Once again, I'd like to thank Sue Thoughts, Michelle Ament, and Amanda Bickerstaff for joining us today on Classroom Dynamics. Thank you for the time today. It has been such a pleasure having you on, and I hope to have you guys on again, because we all know this conversation is not going anywhere. It's just the beginning. So thank you once again.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks for having us.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Classroom Dynamics, where knowledge and inspiration meets innovation. I hope you've enjoyed today's discussion and found it both insightful and uplifting. As always, my goal is to provide you with practical strategies, engaging stories, and powerful insights that can fuel your motivation as an educator. I believe when knowledge and inspiration do come together, incredible things can happen in your classroom. And for all of you who think it's too late to strengthen your craft, I challenge you to make it your mission to do so. You've worked hard to get to where you are today, and it's never too late to infuse new life into your work. So why not make today that day to do so? I'm Adam Todd, and you've been listening to Classroom Dynamics, a teacher podcast. You can follow Classroom Dynamics on X at Class Dynamics and on Instagram at Classroom Dynamics Podcast. If you haven't already, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. We'll be back soon with more captivating conversations, inspiring stories, and strategies that you can implement into your everyday routines. Until then, keep igniting that spark in your classroom and never stop believing in the incredible impact that you have as an educator. You're more powerful and inspirational than you think. Did you miss our episode, Understanding the Reading Brain in a Digital World, a conversation with Dr. Marianne Wolf? Well, if so, join me as I sit down with Dr. Marianne Wolf, renowned cognitive neuroscientist and literacy advocate, to unlock the secrets of the reading brain in a digital world. From the impact of screens on literacy to groundbreaking insights on dyslexia, this conversation is packed with revelations every educator, parent, and reading enthusiast needs to hear. Catch up now and discover how technology and the science of reading is shaping the future of how we understand teaching and reading.
That led me to study the reading brain. And the reading brain, whether it was in people who have what was called alexia or aphasia, and then dyslexia, I needed to know what it takes to learn to read, what it takes to help children with different impediments in that reading brain, and what can I do about it as a researcher and a teacher, ultimately, of other teachers.